Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. Would like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Andrew Murrell. He is the spokesman and attorney for those folks who are trying to incorporate a new city in Southeast Baton Rouge called St. George. The upcoming election is on October 12th for those who live within the proposed city limits to vote. It'll be a majority vote. Early voting is, I believe, September 28th through October 5th. He's going to talk to us about why it's necessary to create a new city. One, better, cheaper government, better schools. And he's also going to tell us why the city of Baton Rouge is wrong. It's not going to hurt the city, and it's going to help the entire parish. Join us on the next Legal Lines with Andrew Murrell for the city of St. George. Legal Lines has interviewed Louisiana Supreme Court justices, appellate trial court judges, federal, state, and local government leaders, including U.S. senators and Congress members. Watch at Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates website, LockeMeredith.com, or Cox Channel 1004.
At Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates, it's an honor and a privilege if you choose us to serve you.
We serve you with respect, dedication, and an unwavering commitment.
We serve you by working hard and striving to get you the best possible results.
We serve you using 60-plus years of legal knowledge, experience, and relationships.
At Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates, we believe that life is about relationships, and it's the mission and ministry of all of us to serve you. Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates has served our community by airing Legal Lines, a community educational program for 18 years weekly to Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas. Watch Legal Lines at LockeMeredith.com or Cox Channel 1004. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'm pleased to have back on the show Andrew Murrell. He is the City of St. George spokesman and an attorney for them. Andrew, pleasure to have you back.
Good to see you again.
It's an interesting time these days. I wanted you to explain what's transpired and where we are today. So I know that we have the big election coming up as to whether or not there is going to be a City of St. George. Tell folks about it.
That's right. We're finally to the point where we get to have a say in whether or not we're going to create a City of St. George. To get here was a lot of hard work and a lot of effort by a lot of people. There, of course, was the petition process. We had to generate over 14,000 signatures. We did. They were validated by the Registrar of Voters earlier this year, which was then sent to the governor's office for validation. He certified that we had enough signatures, and he placed us on the October 12th ballot, the big ballot of the year. And at this point, that's what we're looking forward to. We did legislature this year. We attempted to pass a transition district, which was vetoed by the governor. It was an attempt to create a framework for the City of St. George and East Baton Rouge Parish to maintain taxing authority over a 2% sales tax. Also to create a transition committee whose sole focus was to figure out assets, liabilities, and revenue for the City of St. George so that process could have a seamless transition.
Okay, because I read the proposed bill and it was passed by the Senate. Senator Claytor, Dan Claytor sponsored it, and then Rick Edmonds on the House side. Both chambers passed it.
Overwhelmingly.
And it was submitted to the governor, and he said no. And what was his reasoning?
Well, it's party politics. He bought into the notion that it was premature. Our stance and the East Baton Rouge Parish Bond Council's stance is the taxing authority to levy and collect that 2% sales tax without a transition district will lapse after that election on October 12th if St. George passes. So they cut off their nose to spite their face.
Interesting.
To punish the City of St. George. They're now not going to be able to collect basically $4 million a month in tax revenue, which would be to provide parish-wide services for the City of St. George.
And so the bill that the House and the Senate passed was basically anticipating, and it was conditional. If this happens, there's an issue over money is the bottom line.
That's right.
And services, right?
And
who's going to take the money, and is the parish going to keep providing services? And we need an entity to be involved in negotiating and handling all
That's right. It was a bizarre governmental process where somebody was thinking ahead of problems that they could encounter in the future, and then government bit back and said, whoa, we don't ever plan ahead. We wait till it's too late.
Now, my recall is in advance of that bill, wasn't there a bill presented by a Democratic senator?
Yvonne Dorsey Colon proposed a bill to allow parish-wide voting for the St. George election.
Now, explain the purpose for that.
To allow the entire parish to vote on the incorporation effort of St. George.
Because heretofore, and we've had, 3 other cities have been formed?
Well, I mean, if you look back to the sovereignty of the state of Louisiana, I mean, the entire history of the state, you've never had an incorporation effort that included voters outside of the proposed incorporated area.
It'd be like the United States saying, we can't do what we have to because France
That's right.
doesn't like what we
It'd be like allowing New Orleans to vote for the city of St. George.
Okay.
And that's just not how it works. And it was,
Never has, right?
No, it never has.
And
so-
we had 2 or 3 other cities already incorporated as entities in East Baton Rouge Parish.
Yep,
right?
Central and Baker in recent memory, Zachary a long time before that.
Okay.
Not including areas just outside of this area, the metro area.
And so tons of history and the actual use of the law that confirms the way St. George did it was proper.
That's right. It was such a ridiculous bill. It was shot down in Cologne's own committee, so it never made it out of committee, which was right. And then they directed their efforts to vetoing and killing the transition bill.
Okay, and so that's kind of what's transpired. You mentioned, well, let's dive into the history of this thing.
Okay.
I remember interviewing Hoffpire and another fella, and it sounded like most of this began because they were trying to get their kids into some good schools, because East Baton Rouge, into the magnet schools.
That's right.
And East Baton Rouge Parish schools, sadly, are, if you're lucky, a C, and there's less than that.
If you look, we're one of the lowest ranked school districts in the state that's ranked dead last in education. That's a sad status quo to maintain. So yes, that was the impetus, the beginning, and the major push initially.
Yeah, 10 miles from here, you're in Livingston and you got an A school.
You go to Central, you've got A-rated schools. You get
So
to
it's
Zachary,
interesting.
A-rated
So
schools.
that was the motivation, and so they tried to create the schooling district, and they said, sorry, you can't do it. If you want your own school system, you need to go start your own city.
That's right. That was what we were told repeatedly in the legislature. And then you start looking at that. What does it take to form a city? And the group found out that we really do need to create a city. There's more to this than just a school system. I tell people all the time, this second incorporation effort may have been initially started by the promise for better schools, but once we looked at the actual government itself and saw the waste and the bloated bureaucratic way of doing things, the $100 million in pension liability and the $100 million they're not even paying towards the pension liability, it's a terrifying future for all governments that function this way, but in particular East Baton Rouge Parish. So now the major focus is better government, local control. For the first time in the city of St. George, the proposed area, you will have a large say in how your tax dollars are levied, how their tax dollars are spent. And instead of having maybe one council member who is solely dedicated to you, out of 12, you'll now have an entire city dedicated to your needs and your desires.
It's interesting, for the first time I saw that there's some proposals being considered by the Metro Council for at-large members, and it kind of expanded. Obviously, there's turmoil going on. Their argument, well, let's keep going through the history, but as I understand it, the attempt was made back, we were determined, or the register determined that there was insufficient votes because they threw out some, and you had to wait, what, 2 years?
We did. We had a 2-year moratorium at that point. Then we came back. We had 9 months to gather the allotted signatures. No more indefinite time period to gather. No more indefinite time
Due
period.
to some legislation that was passed.
That's right.
Motivated by you guys.
That's right. Well, if you look, I believe Senator Pat Smith was the author of some of this legislation.
Okay.
So it was a two-party process.
Right.
And now we came back. We fulfilled our goal of the petition signatures being valid. We're on the ballot, and we're asking for an opportunity, October 12th, to determine our fate, to have a good or bad. We're going to either become a city, or we will stay unincorporated.
And I guess the analysis for folks who get to vote, and again, not everybody in the parish votes, or basically nobody in the city limits votes.
That's right.
And only those folks that are in the proposed city are able to vote, and that's actually a smaller area than it was the first time.
It is. It is a smaller area. There's a variety of reasons why the area is smaller. One, the only thing Baton Rouge is concerned about annexing is large revenue sources, and they took several of those from us. So this smaller footprint allows us to maintain what we've promised all along, to operate a more efficient government, to operate at a surplus, not at a deficit like Baton Rouge does. It allows us to target from precinct by precinct basis where our support came from last time. Last time we tried to include everybody. Hey, if you're
And this time you
unincorporated,
included who actually supported it.
that's right. If-
All right, well, we'll continue this. It sounds like the big issue is to trust this hope that it can be done right as compared with the history, however you would evaluate it currently being done. We'll be right back. This is Andrew Murrell with the City of St. George. We'll continue next segment.
Hello, my name is Locke Meredith. I'm one of the attorneys here at Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates. One of the many distinguishing factors of our firm is that we are not just one lawyer that you are hiring. We're a team of attorneys. When you hire one of us, we all pull from each other's experiences, knowledge of the law, so that we get you not only a solution to your problems, but the best solution that we can come up with for your problems. So for that reason and many others, I hope that you hire our firm.
Hi, my name is Mitchell Meredith. I'm one of the associate attorneys here at Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates. One of the reasons I love this firm is that the moment you walk through the doors, you're so much more than business. You're family, which means we're going to fight for you as if you're family. At the end of the day, I think what distinguishes our firm from others is we're a firm that is truly personal, professional, and proven.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I have Andrew Murrell. He is the spokesman for the City of St. George folks who are trying to create the new city of St. George in East Baton Rouge Parish. Let's dive back in. So, when it's all said and done, people who are in this area that can vote are going to have to decide whether they believe and trust that you guys are going to be able, in my view, to do the job better than the city government, parish government is doing it right now. So explain to folks why you're confident, because you've been in this thing for a long time, and you're working for free for all these years, like everybody as far as I know.
It's a true definition of a grassroots
And so
effort.
it's not like anybody's, wants political,
No,
rewards or, making a bunch of cheese. This is hard.
That's right.
It's soul.
It's about leaving a better legacy than we found it. And that's from top to bottom, from government to schools, from roads to drainage. It's leaving it better than you found it. One of the reasons we think we're going to be successful is, well, what is East Baton Rouge Parish doing? They've made no desire to annex our area and bring us in to the city of Baton
Now,
Rouge.
let's remind folks again, the first vote, after the first vote, some people voluntarily, but there was a lot of active pursuit by our current city and parish government to get the big money centers, malls, the casinos,
Some hospitals, exactly.
hospitals, these big money generators to leave what would be the city of St. George, had this passed back then. And a lot of folk, or a considerable amount of business left that would have generated tax revenue.
That's correct.
Okay, and so tell the folks how you're going to do what the job that is currently being done by our city parish government better and cheaper.
Why will we be different than what's currently in place in the status quo? One, it's a public-private partnership. We believe the model we're looking at is Sandy Springs, Georgia. What they did was they're 15 minutes north of Atlanta. They incorporated about a decade ago. They have in excess of $50 million in surplus funds. They have never raised taxes in a decade. They are static on their budget, and they've been able to generate that surplus with the public-private partnership. Instead of hiring a ton of city service, civil service employees that you owe pension liability to.
I think you said $100 million in pension liability.
They've got I believe they've got $125 million on the books they're paying. They've got an additional $100 they should be paying. So think about their budget of $1 billion, and 25% of it should have been pension liability. That's unbelievable. What could you do with $250 million?
Annually?
Annually. It's part of the budget. They have $1 billion budget for EBR Parish. So it's mind-boggling to think about that number and how they got to a budget that size, but they did so by doing the same things over and over again, building the bureaucratic monster. We're never going to start that monster. It's hard to unwind a clock, but in this case, we never get started. We're not going to have a pension system. The 4 to 5 city employees that we intend on having are all going to operate with a 401k-esque type retirement system. So you never have that long-term burden of paying money for employees that don't work for you.
Yeah,
you're paying the public dole, but you're not getting a benefit for that. In addition, we plan on contracting out as many services as makes sense for the city of St. George. So instead of having people on payroll that have no job function for certain periods of the year, the guy cutting grass doesn't cut grass in December, we have employees that are contracted out that we can bring on as we need to.
And again, what services would be provided by a privatization of the current way to do it?
Basically, you're looking at DPW would be a great privatization because those companies can come in and bid on those services.
Department of Public Works.
Exactly right. You can contract out. Drainage is a big ticket item in St. George because we have drainage issues for a variety of reasons, a lot of which goes with poor planning, which gets me to planning and zoning. Would also be something that's privatized. If you look at the system, and Central is a model, but not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but their system is privatized for planning and zoning and permitting. They don't have nearly the backlog that EBR Parish does. Why? Because they can contract it out. So instead of getting backlogged and overworked, they have the ability
to hire more and when it's slow down.
Exactly right. You have flexibility. You also have the ability to terminate a contract for breach, which is much different than the civil service
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is, I mean, it's very hard to terminate the employment of a civil servant.
Absolutely.
Federal or state.
And so with the public-private partnership, you have the ability to be flexible. With a city the size of
General
ours,
control.
86,000 people, you've got a small, nimble city that's able to move and pivot when the need arises.
Yeah, every time I talk with Senator Claytor, Dan Claytor, and different folks, the biggest problem that governments have is that they have very limited funds that they can actually, that's what, most of the funds, or a huge percentage of them, are already dedicated to these other expenses. And in this case, those expenses would not be dedicated, they would be negotiated annually where it can occur.
Well, we have the ability to pick and choose. So for services that the parish is providing, that they're doing good at, that they're doing a good job and we're happy with, we can continue that parish-wide service and use the power of the parish to contract.
Okay.
But we also could partner with our neighbors in Central, Zachary, Baker, and Baton Rouge, and do individual partnerships where that makes more sense.
Really interesting. You got more players.
The only thing that we care about in St. George is what's best for the citizens of the city of St. George. And if that means a public-private partnership, then we're going to privatize it, bid it out, and monitor those services to make sure we're getting what we contract and pay for, as opposed to what the city parish does now.
Well, so, all right, so you've kind of explained the purpose and kind of the motivation of how this all began. Who's going to provide for the policing services, the fire services, and such?
Well, we're doing, I actually saw a horrible post the other day on the Nextdoor app, which is a neighborhood app, and it was, our property taxes are going up because if we vote yes for St. George, we're not going to have a fire department. You can call any St. George Fire Department and they will be more than happy to let you know that they provide services regardless of this election. They, along with the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office, their services to our area is not determined by this election. They will always provide services for this area. What will happen with the city of St. George is we've budgeted an additional $4 million to provide Sid Gotro, if he's the sheriff, and the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office with additional resources they can dedicate to St. George, whether that be a substation, additional boots on the ground, cameras,
license plate,
to spend it how the sheriff's department sees fit, as long as it's beneficial to the city of St. George. And the fire department's the same way. We have a world-class fire department in St. George. We're going to continue to allow them to do their job and give them the resources they need to do it.
Now, as I understand it, the big kind of complaint being made or arrow shot at you guys is that there is no way that you're going to be able to do what y'all say you're going to do. You're not going to be able to provide the services for what you have projected it to cost. And they're raising the fact, and I guess it was maybe one of their motivators, was that you've lost a lot of the revenue because they annexed a lot of property that would have generated a chunk of money every year. So, so what is your discussion as it relates to that?
I think you have to first look at your messenger. It's very important to see who's telling you that your taxes are going up if St. George is a reality. One, the city parish, the people that have put a tax raise on the ballot 17 times in the last 13 ballots they've tried to raise your taxes.
We'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Andrew Murrell, spokesman for City of St. George, folks. We'll be right back.
Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates has served our community by airing Legal Lines, a community educational program for 18 years weekly to Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas. Watch Legal Lines at LockeMeredith.com or Cox Channel 1004.
Hello, my name is Sean Fagan. And you know, one of the most important considerations in hiring an attorney is considering trust. I believe at our firm, our results speak for themselves. Most of the people we represent come from past clients who have referred friends, family members, other people they love to us to represent them in the same way we represented the persons who referred them. It's the greatest compliment any law firm could get. And I believe that if you come to our firm, we'll earn your trust.
Legal Lines has interviewed Louisiana Supreme Court justices, appellate trial court judges, federal, state, and local government leaders, including U.S. senators and Congress members. Watch at Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan and Associates website, LockeMeredith.com or Cox Channel 1004.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. It's Locke Meredith, and my guest is Andrew Murrell. He is a spokesman for the City of St. George folks. They're a lawyer too. Let's dive back in. So, election's coming up October 12th, only a month and a half away. And what I'm reading right now is the city is saying there is no way the City of St. George folks can do what they're saying they're doing without raising taxes. They're going to have to raise taxes 9 to 14 million from what I saw using, I guess, generated numbers solely by them. And what's your response?
Well, again, I go back to who's the messenger. If what they're saying is true, that means that Baton Rouge is subsidizing the area that's going to be St. George. If they're subsidizing the area that's going to be St. George, why are they complaining that we're leaving so much? Why are they concerned if they were losing money on that investment in St. George, then why are they worried about us leaving? At the same time, if you look at their numbers, they're telling you we're going to generate $48 million in annual revenue. That is their number, not ours. I've seen it in 2 of their reports,
Right,
so that is their number.
That's all.
They're also indicating, if you look at the Richardson report, he estimates our expenses at $47 million. So you use his numbers, we're going to be $1 million in the black. If you use our expense numbers, we're at $34 million. We're going to have a $10 to $14 million surplus in year 1.
Regardless of the annexation.
Exactly right. With the numbers and the
Because
revenue
my
we have
recall
now.
was, back then, y'all saying you were going to get almost a third of the tax money would turn into surplus, I thought.
That's right.
It was a huge number.
And so we're looking at a $10 to $14 million surplus, and that's using their number for their expenses the way they do business, which we've already said is not how we're doing business.
Right.
But we wanted to use a conservative number on both ends for revenue and expenses so we could be honest and forthright and say, look, this is what we project, this is what we project. With that number, those numbers in mind, we have a $10 to $14 million surplus.
And that would be if you did if you implemented running the city the way you want.
The budget we have that includes an additional $4 million to go to the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office.
Okay, all right, and so my recall was, like you said, there's 48 million rather that is estimated to be generated within the geographic boundaries of the city of St. George.
That's right.
All right, they're saying you're going to pay multiple millions, 9, 14, whatever, more than you're saying. You're saying no way. At worst case scenario, $1 million.
Yeah, no matter what numbers you're looking at
Best
now,
case scenario, you could be 30. You'll say what, 10 million?
10 to 14 million. So no matter whose numbers you're now looking at,
All right, so
we have a surplus.
now the other kind of argument I've seen expressed by the city and parish government is that if you take $48 million from us, these folks that have been your neighbors and are your neighbors and have been there with you all this time, they're not going to get the same quality service they've been getting because we're going to have to reduce every department, every agency's budget by 18%. And if we maintain the same numbers for the safety folks, the police and fire and such, it's way worse than 18%, it's 45%. We're going to have to reduce our budget by 45%. So what's your response?
there are a lot of flaws in that argument. First and foremost is the city of St. George, that area has been paying for the Baton Rouge Police and Baton Rouge Fire Department. Well, that's funny. We don't get Baton Rouge Police and Baton Rouge Fire Services in our area.
That's right.
So we've been
Not normal.
So we've been subsidizing those 2 departments essentially without getting those services for a very long time. The other reality is the city loves to talk about the 48 million we're going to be taking from the general fund. What they fail to tell you is the number of expenses we're also taking. So if you use Jim Richardson, the economist, who they paid $17,000 to do a study, if you take his number of expenses at 47 million, the effect of St. George on Baton Rouge is less than $1 million.
Interesting.
So
Say that again?
they love to look at our revenue. They say we're going to take 48 million from their $324 million general fund. They fail to look at the expenses and liability we're also taking out of that fund.
And you know it's at least that amount.
If Jim Richardson says that our liabilities are going to be 47 million, then our effect on Baton Rouge is going to be less than $1 million at most. If you take our number, it's 10 to 14 million. Now the mayor about 6 months ago discovered $7 million in unused fleet vehicles in a parking lot that they said they were going to sell. What are you going to do with that revenue? Well, she said give pay raises to everybody. She should have said pay down my liability and my debt like I'm supposed to.
All right. So that's kind of where things are. These are the positions of the parties, and the election's October 12th.
That's it. October 12th is your chance, if you're in the St. George area, to finally have local control over your neighborhood, over your city of St. George. It's the first time in your history of living in this parish where you'll actually be able to control the city council and the mayor's office, and your local tax dollars will be spent locally on things for you and your family.
And your government that y'all plan to implement is modeled off of already successful cities who have done exactly what y'all would do.
That's right. You find somebody in Sandy Springs, Georgia that's unhappy about incorporation, I'll find you an Atlanta politician.
Okay.
That's the only people who'd be unhappy with it. We're going to have a streamlined government. You're looking at a mayor, you're looking at a part-time city council, just like the Metro Council, and then you're looking at a chief of police because the state constitution requires it, and you're looking at basically 4 to 5 full-time employees for the city of St. George, and that is
And
it.
the rest is
The rest
contracted out.
Contracted out that can be added or subtracted as needed.
Now the schools, that's always the big issue in the beginning. So schools, tell me how that's going to improve.
The schools, the driving force for the first time was the school system. It's now an issue with the second time. Our petition efforts do include a component for the school system, but that component is after this election. October 12th addresses the city only. There will not be a school system created,
Okay.
but we've always been told if you want that school system, you have to create that city. So after the election, a group will move forward, I'm sure, with the efforts to create the school system, which at this point includes setting boundaries and transferring school revenue. And that's it.
And again, the vote is going to be determined by however many people show up, a
That's right.
majority. If 100 people showed up,
50 plus
and
1.
51 vote yes,
We're a
that's
city
it.
of St. George.
If 100 million showed up, but obviously those aren't the numbers.
And to think about the October 12th election, so it's a big election. You expect 40 to 45% turnout. That's a governor's ballot. It's going to be a big deal. It's the LSU Florida home game that weekend. It's also, there's several schools taking a 3 to 4 day weekend that weekend. It is imperative that you remember you can early vote starting September 28th. You can get all that information at stgeorgelouisiana.com. It's very important. Don't take this for granted. This chance will not happen
Yeah,
again.
this will never happen
This
again.
is it. This is the third largest incorporation effort in American history.
Man, I didn't know that. That's
It is a massive undertaking. We will not get it again. If you want it, start early voting September 28th. Don't forget, you can register to vote. You can go get the Go Vote app and sign up. Get the information, stgeorgelouisiana.com. You can always find us there, and if you have questions about St. George, we're always available.
Okay, and the vote takes place on October 12th.
October 12th.
If it is passed, a transition entity will be formed.
Yes, the governor will be able to appoint the first mayor and city council for St. George, and the transition period will begin until
And it'll
elections.
probably take 2 or 3 years for transition, but y'all anticipate some litigation.
I think it's fair to say that the opposition has already threatened it in committee hearings at legislature, that they intend on filing suit for something
So it's gonna
to delay us and hold the tax dollars.
Andrew, thank you very much. Appreciate it, buddy. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. Andrew Murrell for the City of St. George. Thanks for being with us.